You shouldn't see me like this. Man doesn't cry.
When is it okay for a grown man to cry? This is one of the main questions the Iron Claw forces its audience to wrestle with, and the answer is more complicated than you might think. The film is a fictionalized account of the many tragedies faced by the Von Erich brothers during their pro wrestling careers, and it's one of the most nuanced examinations of masculinity in modern cinema. That's why today, we'll be doing an in-depth analysis of the film's narrative and breaking down what the Iron Claw has to say about topics like generational trauma, how to break negative cycles, and whether or not the line between positive and toxic masculinity is as clear-cut as some people seem to think. I'm Dylan, and this is The Writer's Block. As you might expect, the movie begins in the wrestling ring. More specifically, it opens on professional wrestler Fritz Von Erich as he performs his signature move, the Iron Claw. This move is the inspiration for the film's title, which is significant because it represents the core struggle of the entire movie. You see, the patriarch of the Von Erich family believes that athletic success is the only way to prove a man's worth. He assumes that once he achieves greatness in the sport of professional wrestling, that everything else will fall into place.
I will be the NWA World Heavyweight Champion, and nothing will hurt us ever again.
In theory, this is a noble pursuit. After all, who wouldn't want to provide a good life for the people they care about?
We need a real house.
But his singular focus and stubborn attitude means that he doesn't take counsel from those around him. Rather than viewing his wife as a partner, he views her as a dependent. Rather than being humble enough to accept help from others, he teaches his children
To rely on no one but ourselves.
When we jump forward in time to the main story, we see just how severely this line of thinking has infected his children.
Ever since I was a child, people said my family was cursed.
During the montage of Kevin's morning routine, our protagonist practically recites his father's mantra verbatim.
He said if we were the toughest, the strongest, the most successful, nothing could ever hurt us.
Confirming that they consider their father's worldview to be accurate. And this is why the title is so significant. Each one of the Von Erich brothers is metaphorically caught in the Iron Claw. They're being pressured by their father to make up for his failures, and each one of them has to decide between being their own man or shouldering the burden of their father's legacy. Now, having watched the movie multiple times, it's incredible seeing how well the opening sequence exhibits the core traits of each character. Kevin Von Erich is the oldest living brother and the main character of the narrative. He's not much of a talker, but instead follows in his father's footsteps silently, focusing on physical excellence as a means to achieve success and protect his siblings. David, the second oldest, is the most charismatic of the bunch, and isn't afraid to verbally speak out to advocate for his brothers.
I'll always have your back, Mikey.
Mike, the youngest member of the family, is the most comfortable with going in a different direction. He's mostly unfazed by his father's criticism.
Mike, you need to start hitting the weights more, kid.
And chooses to redirect the conversation rather than escalating the conflict.
May not be the strongest, but I still can't eat the most.
We also see how their father's love is dependent on their success.
Kerry is about to become the family's first Olympian. Kevin is the NWA Texas champion. It's time for you to start thinking about what you're going to be.
And how he pits the brothers against one another.
Now, we all know Kerry's my favorite, then Kev, then David, then Mike. But the rankings can always change.
He might believe he's doing what's best for the family, but in actuality, he's sowing the seeds of its destruction. We also get a glimpse at how Doris, Von Erich's mother, enables their father's behavior. When Kevin tries to seek out his mother's help, she turns him away.
Hey, I've been thinking. Can I talk to you about something?
Baby, that's what your brothers are for.
And when he voices his concern for his brother,
Dad's too tough on Mike, Ma. You gotta say something.
she simply acts as if there's nothing to be done.
Please?
Kevin, that's between them.
Sure, she loves her children, but her refusal to advocate for them or herself means that she cannot be the mother they need. We're barely 10 minutes into the movie by this point, and the core issues that will lead to tragedy have already been presented to the audience. Ironically, the next sequence shows us how good things could have been were it not for their father's interference. When Kevin and David pick up Mike from band practice, we see that they're happy that he's pursuing music. All they want to do is be brothers and have fun together. They don't naturally view one another as competition, but as the story progresses, we'll see how their father changes that. Later, when Kevin is doing promo for his upcoming fight,
I just want to say that, Gino, you've been running that mouth of yours way too long.
he can barely get through half a take without flubbing his lines.
I got something special for you. Boy, oh boy. It ain't gonna be all roses.
He might be able to fight good, but his trash talk game could use a lot of work.
If it's so easy, you get up here and do it there.
That night, after winning a tag team match with his brother, Kevin is lucky enough to meet a young lady.
It's Pam.
Kevin, however, is even worse at flirting than he is at doing promo.
You're supposed to say nice to meet you, Pam.
It is nice to meet you, man.
It's nice to meet you too, Kevin.
What I love about this scene, aside from the obvious, is that it's more than just a cute way to introduce Kevin's partner. It also shows why she's such a good match for him, and foreshadows how she will eventually help him overcome his central flaw. Despite how physically tough Kevin is, it's incredibly difficult for him to advocate for himself. He constantly struggles to communicate his feelings because his father has taught him to suppress any and all emotions.
Your folks not teach you how to ask questions?
Pam, on the other hand, is incredibly direct. She communicates her feelings clearly and asks Kevin on a date without hesitation.
Well, hopefully it'll go well, and then no one else will have the chance to ask you again.
What seems like an inconsequential moment on first viewing is actually the first step in shaking Kevin out of his bad habits and helping him become a better man. Back in the office, Fritz learns that ratings are through the roof. Bill Mercer then explains to him,
if we perform and we have a world heavyweight champion in our roster, we could be the biggest promotion in wrestling.
To which Fritz ominously responds,
Or we'll have a world heavyweight champion.
He doesn't say it directly, but he's clearly implying that he's willing to do whatever it takes to get that title, regardless of what it might cost. Fritz cares more about the status of his family than their well-being. He claims to be a patriarch looking out for his relatives, but in actuality, he's just a selfish man trying to inflate his own ego. Being champion was meant to protect his children from harm, but now he's become the very thing he swore to destroy. Speaking of which, while Kevin and Pam are on their first date, Pam begins to ask very deep and very direct questions.
What do you want in life, Kevin Von Erich?
Forcing Kevin to reflect on the man he wants to be.
I want to be world heavyweight champion.
And is that all you want?
No, of course not. I want to be with my family.
Without realizing it, Pam is starting to make Kevin see the difference between athletic and personal success. Even though his father wants the boys to believe that there is no family without wrestling, Pam helps Kevin understand that he'd be happy doing anything so long as he's with his brothers.
What do you like to do with your brothers?
Anything.
Later in the conversation, after Pam accuses Kevin of having oldest brother syndrome,
Yeah, you want to take care of everyone.
Kevin firmly emphasizes that this is not the case.
I'm not the oldest, though. When I was 5, my big brother Jack Jr., he died.
This moment is incredibly interesting to me because it says a lot about how Kevin views his family. Even though his older brother passed away early in Kevin's life, Kevin still holds space for him. His presence is still felt, and Kevin wants people to know that he has no desire to replace him.
I must have the second oldest brother syndrome.
When Kevin jokingly remarks that it's just a part of the family curse, he's surprised that Pam has no idea what he's talking about. The belief goes that after their dad changed his last name, bad things began happening to the family. Likewise, when things start to go wrong later in the movie, many believe these tragedies are also part of the curse. But that raises an important question. What actually is causing the family curse? Well, at least according to the movie, Fritz Von Erich is the curse. His singular focus and disregard for the safety of his family is what leads to one tragedy after the next. By pushing his family so hard, he sets them down a path that is paved with their own blood, sweat, and tears. The problem is, because everyone thinks some supernatural curse is to blame, no one thinks they have agency in the situation. Their mother prays instead of speaking out. The brothers just try to train harder rather than reassessing what they want to achieve in life. On an emotional level, it is easier for everyone to think that they're cursed than to accept that their patriarch is leading them astray. So why is Fritz so obsessed with his kids becoming champions? Well, he basically tells us directly in the next scene. After explaining to Kevin that he's been given a non-title fight against the world heavyweight champion, Fritz reveals,
I've dreamed of having that belt in this house my whole career. I got close many times, but they always robbed me at the last minute. So you have to take this opportunity. You can be the one to bring it home for us.
And suddenly, his motivations don't seem so complicated. The whole mantra about protecting his family is really just a bunch of nonsense. The honest truth of the matter is that Fritz is insecure about never achieving his dream, and thus decided to force that same dream onto his children. That's why his love is conditional on their success. He doesn't view them as people, but rather as employees. He cares about his sons achieving greatness because it reflects positively on him as their manager, not because it's beneficial for them. This is also why the ranking of his favorites can change. Whichever son is most successful is the one he wants to live vicariously through. He sees his children as an extension of himself rather than as their own people. When it comes time for the match, things go according to plan until Harley Race suddenly decides to throw Kevin out of the ring. Therefore, when Kevin gets slammed onto the ground, it's much more painful than expected. Kevin wins by disqualification, but his father is disappointed because of how long it took him to get up.
You were long getting up.
There's no concern for whether or not Kevin is injured,
Just never hit the floor that hard before.
You gotta take it and get up.
just disdain at the fact that Kevin appeared weak on television. When the match ends, Kevin tries to speak on the microphone, but hasn't recovered from getting the wind knocked out of him.
Harley Race! You coward.
Trying to help his brother, David takes the mic for him and speaks with immense charisma.
Tonight, we showed you what we're made of.
Now, in a healthy family, this would be a good thing. Kevin's athletic ability and David's knack for public speaking should complement one another beautifully.
And my brother here put a good old-fashioned Texas whooping on me.
But because of the way Fritz has raised his family, this becomes a moment of division.
Why didn't you let me talk?
You didn't?
You should have let me talk.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Kev. I thought I was helping.
Any favor one brother gains in the eyes of their father comes at the expense of the others.
But the rankings can always change.
Deep down, Kevin knows that his father will not hesitate to replace him. And while that should be a sign that his approval isn't worth chasing, Kevin isn't yet ready to accept this. The second act of the movie opens with the introduction of Carrie, currently Fritz's favorite.
But the rankings can always change.
As he learns that the US will not be participating in the Olympics. It's heavily implied that being an Olympian was a major dream of his, and to have that ripped away so suddenly is devastating. It not only makes him question what he wants to do next, but who it is he's going to be. In the 21 Pilots song,
"We don't believe what's on TV.
There's a couplet that goes,
What if my dream does not happen? Would I just change what I've told my friends? Don't want to know who I would be when I wake up from a dreamer's sleep."
Which I think really captures what Carrie is going through. I can only speak for the male experience, but I think it's very easy for men to tie up a large part of their identity in the goals they are trying to achieve. They set their sights on something and give it their all, but if it doesn't work out, it's easy for them to lose a part of themselves in the process. Having a vision for your life is great, but you are not just the things you set out to achieve. When Carrie returns home, the family puts together a barbecue to celebrate. During the meal, Mikey is excited to talk to him about the new camera equipment.
Hey, Carrie, you see all the new camera angles? They're cool, right?
Yep.
But their father immediately shuts down the conversation.
We're talking about wrestling, not camera angles.
This right here is a perfect example of their father ruining a good thing in search of greatness. Mike cares about wrestling. He just cares more about the audio and broadcasting than he does getting in the ring. He's in a perfect position to support his brothers and the family business, but his father won't leave well enough alone because he has such a narrow definition of success. It's yet another instance of Fritz pushing someone to the breaking point to live out his dream instead of their own. That night, the boys sneak out to a college party where Mike and his band sing, "I wanna live that way forever." And the song choice is no coincidence. This is the last real moment that the brothers are able to share without the burden of wrestling or their father looming over them. They're just four boys having a good time together.
Look at my beautiful brothers!
Yahoo! If they could live this way forever, everything would turn out alright. But, of course, it's not that simple. The very next day, Fritz confronts Carrie and pressures him into becoming a wrestler.
I don't know if you've been thinking about your future, but you should think about wrestling.
He claims that this isn't what he wanted for him.
Now, I wouldn't wish wrestling on any of you, and I always hoped you boys would choose another profession.
But that's obviously a lie. Carrie, like his brothers, is just a victim of a proud man with a fragile ego.
The world keeps taking from us, and I'm sick of it.
After Carrie agrees to join Kevin and David, we begin a montage that sees the three of them become bigger and bigger celebrities. Their performance in the ring is undeniably glorious, but there's also a sinister undercurrent. As they go on the road, we see David and Carrie turn to illegal substances as they get swept up in the work hard, play hard mentality. Kevin is visibly concerned for them, but he's too busy starting a life of his own to act as their chaperone. The montage ends with the Von Erichs beating the Freebirds, which you think would be a happy moment, but surprise, surprise, their father immediately ruins everything. When Fritz calls out the NWA, rather than put forward Kevin as a challenger, he names David as their champion.
David Von Erich will be the next NWA World Heavyweight Champion!
Kevin is visibly confused and devastated by this decision, but he's not given any space to process his feelings.
Is there a problem? No, sir.
In spite of all the work he's put in, and all the promises made to him by his father, his dream is ripped away from him without hesitation. And is it really all that surprising? After all, Kevin wasn't meant to achieve his own dream, but rather his father's.
I've dreamed of having that belt in this house my whole career.
Once David became the most popular wrestler in the family, it was only a matter of time before their father favored him instead. What intrigues me most about this is that if David had a choice, he would gladly defer his position to Kevin.
Sure doesn't mean me first.
Pops make mistakes like that.
But their father won't allow it.
Don't look to your brother. This is your time.
Fritz doesn't want them to support one another for fear that it might make them soft. We cut from the locker room to Kevin and Pam's wedding, where once again, a happy moment is made sour by the looming shadow of Fritz von Erich. During the reception, Kevin finds David curled up in the bathroom.
Jesus, man.
Clearly, something is very wrong with David, but he forces himself to ignore it for the sake of his career.
You need to see a doctor. No, I'm fine.
Kevin tries to make him rethink things.
I don't think you should go to Japan next week.
But the two can't help but laugh. He's absolutely right that staying home would be best for David's health, but the thought of putting their needs before their father's is downright ridiculous to them. Not one scene later, Kevin gets the terrible news that David is no longer with them.
He died in his hotel room in Japan. A ruptured intestine.
The most tragic part of this scene, though, is when Kevin asks his father,
"How does that happen?"
It's such a hard moment to watch because the answer is right there in front of him. It's their father who's to blame for this easily avoidable tragedy. If he hadn't forced his dream on his children, if he hadn't forced them into wrestling, if he hadn't said David's name instead of Kevin's, David would still be alive. But the thing is, no one in the family is ready to admit this. Their father's abuse has become so normalized that they look for any other possible explanation. And even if one of them realized that their father was to blame, they would be shunned for pointing out the problem. It's an incredibly toxic cycle, and unfortunately, it's not over. Before the funeral, Fritz tells his sons that they aren't allowed to cry.
No hiding. I don't want to see any tears.
In his mind, their grieving process is a performance. He expects them to mourn while simultaneously upholding the Von Erich brand.
Our greatness will be measured by our response to adversity.
None of them are allowed to communicate or embrace their emotions. As a result of this, Kevin resorts to shutting down and pulling away from those who love him unconditionally. He views his own sorrow as a character flaw rather than a natural part of losing someone you care about, and does not want to be perceived during a moment of weakness. That night, before the dirt has even settled on their brother's grave, their father forces them to think about wrestling.
Now, David's title match against Ric Flair is a moment of a lifetime.
His dreams are far more important to him than the loss of his son. The Von Erichs might have lost a member, but that just means another one needs to be promoted.
We still have a chance to bring the World Heavyweight Championship home if one of you will step up and wrestle in his place.
Both Kevin and Carrie offer to take David's place, but each have very different reasons for doing so. The somber, reluctant way Kevin says,
"I'll do it,"
tells the audience this isn't actually something he's excited to do. He even admitted earlier,
"Thing is, I didn't even really want it that bad."
But Kevin knows how overwhelming their father's expectations can be and doesn't want one of his younger siblings to have to shoulder that burden. On the other hand, Kevin views this opportunity as a privilege.
"I'm ready, Dad. I want it."
He's desperate not only for his father's approval, but for an objective that will give his life purpose. The problem is, when Fritz picks Carrie to take David's place, and Carrie does become the World Heavyweight Champion, he still feels lost.
"I'm having trouble coming down."
Whether it's because it wasn't really his dream, or because a belt was never going to fix his family's problems, his victory is ultimately hollow. Visually, we see this reflected just before he loses his foot in a motor accident. Carrie is alone on a path that seemingly has no end. He follows the path in hopes that it will lead to something better, but the only thing he finds is more pain. At this point in the movie, things begin to go from bad to worse. Not wanting to continue the Von Erich curse, Kevin insists that his children take a different last name.
Actually, his last name will be Atkinson.
Meanwhile, after Mikey is pressured into joining the family business, a minor injury suffered during a match winds up putting him in a coma.
How? It was a routine shoulder surgery.
Well, it's rare, but it happens.
As a result, Kevin becomes incredibly despondent, causing a rift to develop between him and Pam. He blames the recent events on the curse, and doesn't believe he has any agency.
But it keeps happening. It's taken over.
Pam directly tells him that Fritz is to blame for all of this.
"If you want to blame someone, you blame your father. But it is not your fault."
But Kevin just can't seem to accept this. Kevin has dedicated his entire life to this man. If his father isn't as infallible as he thinks he is, then much of Kevin's time and effort has been spent in vain. That's a scary thing to reckon with. By comparison, blaming yourself at least means that you have some agency in the matter. It's not a healthy mindset, but it is understandable. Mike eventually wakes up from his coma, but both his cognitive and physical abilities are impaired.
I'm moved that my whole family is here.
What's even worse is that there's immediately a pressure put upon him to return to wrestling.
I know I'll be back soon. Yeah, soon.
Their father doesn't care that both Mike and Carrie have just gone through life-altering accidents. If they want his love, or what he makes them think is love, then they need to be working for the family business. The immense weight of their father's expectations ultimately pushes them in two very different but equally tragic directions. Whereas Carrie puts himself through an agonizing amount of pain, Mike is more concerned with not being a burden to others. His father wants him to be someone that he's not.
Everybody wants me to be David, but I can't replace him.
And now more than ever, his dream of being a musician feels impossible. He's lost any sense of direction, which is a terrifying position for someone to be in.
I'm scared, Mom.
I think this is ultimately what makes him choose to bring his life to an end. In a depressing but effective bit of visual storytelling, we hear Mike struggle to play the guitar as we watch Kevin practice with Carrie in the backyard. The dialogue itself harkens back to the scene with David at the wedding.
You're pushing too hard. You need to rest.
I'm almost there.
Once again, Kevin pleads with his brother not to push himself too hard.
Maybe this is God trying to tell you to slow down.
He knows how much he's struggling and wants nothing more than for Carrie to find happiness doing anything else.
I see how much pain you're in. Maybe you should do something else with your life.
But because of how their father raised them, Carrie can't understand what Kevin is trying to do.
Why? You're the only brother left in the ring. You get old daddy's attention.
His brother is offering him a helping hand, but Carrie just sees it as a slap in the face. Even worse, because the two are fighting, they don't see Mike wandering off into the darkness.
I'm sorry if I hurt you, but I'm going to a better place.
You think it wouldn't be so hard for these three brothers to be there for one another in a moment like this, but they've all been divided and isolated by their father's conditioning. By the time Mike's funeral rolls around, Kevin is barely keeping it together. He's more despondent than ever, and he's essentially abandoning his wife and child because he believes they'll catch the curse if he's around them.
Just come home. All right, just be with us.
I don't want him to get it. I want you guys to catch it.
Kevin, you can't be serious.
I think this scene between Kevin and Pam is an excellent example of how nature versus nurture can be at odds with one another. On a fundamental level, Kevin is a good person, and he truly wants to be a good father and husband, but he's unable to be the man he needs to be because he still believes the lie taught to him by his father, that vulnerability is weakness.
I don't want to see any tears.
Kevin is terrified that letting others be around him when he's struggling will be a burden. He's ashamed that he can't handle everything on his own, and he doesn't want to reach out to others for help. Though his motivations are completely different from that of his father's, his actions are quite similar at this point in the narrative. He's choosing isolation over community, he's focusing on a singular objective at the cost of everything around it, and like his father, his actions risk destroying the family that he has built. The only way for Kevin to overcome this hardship is for him to internalize a fundamental human truth, that vulnerability is strength. To let others share in your sorrow as well as your joy takes an immense amount of bravery.
I won't have peace. I'll be worried about you all the time.
That's just love. Nothing you can do about that.
Now, Kevin at this point is certainly brave, it's just that his worldview is still obscured by the shadow of his father, which is why the next sequence is so critical. When Ric Flair agrees to fight Kevin in a title fight, Kevin finally gets a chance at being champion. It's something he's wanted his whole life, so as you can imagine, the stakes are incredibly high. The problem is, the moment Kevin gets in the ring, he completely loses control. All his pent-up anger and rage comes pouring out, culminating in him trapping Flair in the Iron Claw. And when I say trapped, I mean it. Despite the ref ordering him to let go, nothing seems to get through to Kevin. Even after he loses by disqualification, his father has to rip Kevin off of Flair in order to bring the ordeal to a close. Afterwards, all anyone can say is,
"What happened, kid?"
But, how is he supposed to know? It's not like anyone in his family has ever taught him how to express an honest emotion. It seems kind of ridiculous to all of a sudden ask him to do some nuanced self-reflection. Fritz is clearly disappointed in Kevin and simply tells Carrie,
"Come on, son."
It's a subtle dig, but the way he says son singular really seems to imply that after Kevin messed up this fight, Carrie is the only son that he will be acknowledging from now on.
Attaboy, Carrie. That's how you do it.
And this is when I think everything changes. Rather than seem disappointed or hurt, Kevin simply chuckles. It's as if he's finally realized just how ridiculous his father really is. In the match with Ric Flair, Kevin essentially becomes his father. Seeing him viciously attack his opponent looks eerily similar to when Fritz was fighting at the beginning of the film. And isn't that what Fritz wanted all along? To have his sons carry on his legacy in the ring? To have them act as an extension of himself? Ric Flair even offers Kevin a rematch.
Oh, Kevin. Oh, man, you look great. I always thought you were a little soft, but baby, you got it. I'll give you a rematch any day.
But it's still not enough for him, because nothing will ever be enough for him. And once Kevin realizes that, he suddenly sees through all the lies his father pushed upon him. There is no curse. Vulnerability is not a weakness, and family is meant to support one another. With this newfound knowledge, Kevin is finally able to make things right with his family. He returns home to Pam and dedicates himself to his role as a father. Several years pass, and while things are going well with his family, financially, Kevin is struggling.
We need to make a change.
He's now the owner of his father's wrestling business, and he's considering selling the company in order to better support his family.
I need to think about my family, Dad. I'm almost broke.
Unsurprisingly, Fritz threatens to disown Kevin.
If you sell, you can forget about stepping through these doors again.
And it's also revealed that Fritz wasn't paying Kevin what he actually earned.
I've been through the books. It doesn't add up. I didn't make nearly what it says I did.
You think living here was a free ride? Don't you dare question me.
On Christmas Eve, Carrie briefly stops by to visit family, prompting Kevin to check in on how his brother is doing.
Hey, you okay?
Yeah, never been better.
But it's clear that Kevin doesn't fully believe him. Soon after, Kevin wakes up to a call from his brother, who is audibly distressed.
Oh, I'm scared. I'm out of control.
After failing to get his wrestling contract renewed, Carrie feels utterly lost.
They don't want me anymore. Well, I got nowhere to go. I got no one.
He was never able to find a new dream of his own, and chasing after his father's dream was the only thing giving him direction. He feels completely isolated and is desperate for the support of others.
I need someone. I need family.
But the way he's been raised means that he's ashamed to admit he needs help.
Stay with us.
No, I can't. I can't let your boy see me like this.
Their father spent so much time making him distrust others that Carrie doesn't think that anyone is able to help him. He's been made to believe that every viable solution is pointless to pursue, which means he doesn't even try.
Yeah, I want it on the end.
No, you don't. No, you don't. You don't mean that.
What makes this scene so hard to watch is that even though Kevin has already overcome the lies of his father, he's unable to explain this to Carrie. He knows what Carrie needs, but doesn't know how to get through to him. And because of this, the first emotionally honest conversation these brothers have is also their last.
It's in me now. It's got a hold of me.
The next day, Kevin comes looking for Carrie, but is just a moment too late. After hearing a gun go off, Kevin finds his brother's body and nearly strangles his father when he comes to investigate. Personally, I don't think Kevin stops out of mercy. The rage he feels is more than enough motivation to go through with it.
I told you to look out for him! You didn't take care of him!
I think Kevin stops because he knows it won't make a difference. Even after everything that has happened, Fritz still is unable to see that he's at fault.
You didn't take care of any of them! He called you, and you didn't help him!
Violence won't get through to him because nothing will. He believes his lies more than anyone else. Realizing this, Kevin chooses to literally and figuratively let his father go. He sells the company, he raises his family, and he finally tells his brother how he feels.
I love you, Carrie.
Speaking of his brother, the last scene in which we see Carrie depicts him being reunited with his brothers in what appears to be the afterlife. It's not clear if this is meant to be from Carrie's perspective, or if this is something Kevin is picturing to bring himself comfort, but either way, the symbolic significance remains the same. In this sequence, all four brothers, including Jack Jr., are depicted not how they died, but rather how Kevin would want to remember them. David is a champion, Mikey is a musician, Carrie is uninjured, and Jack Jr. is able to meet his younger siblings. It's as if you rewound the film back to this moment.
Look at my beautiful brothers!
Yahoo! And they actually did live this way forever. The only thing missing is Kevin, and when his time comes, they'll be more than happy to welcome him home. The final scene of The Iron Claw centers around a simple but immensely profound conversation between Kevin and his two sons. As he watches his children play in the yard, Kevin suddenly begins to cry. And his children immediately take notice.
Do you think you know why you're sad?
Kevin feels the need to apologize to them.
Sorry, boys. You shouldn't see me like this.
But his boys explain that he has nothing to be ashamed about.
You can cry. Everyone cries. Yeah, what are you talking about? You cry all the time.
It might seem like just a silly moment of kids being kids, but this dialogue actually reveals a great deal about what the movie is trying to say about being a man. Kevin has gone to great lengths not to pass down the trauma he endured at the hands of his father.
No hiding. I don't want to see any tears.
In doing so, his boys have a much broader view of what a man can be and how they can and should express their emotions. Restrictive definitions of masculinity are forced upon us through conditioning rather than by nature. Fritz's behavior might have appeared more masculine, but in reality, he was too much of a coward to accept his own failures. Meanwhile, Kevin is the one who actually was brave enough to be vulnerable and reflect on how he can improve as a person. It obviously wasn't easy for him, but Kevin's character is an absolute paragon of positive masculinity by the end of this film. Another important bit of dialogue is when he reveals why it is that he's crying.
Well, I guess it's because I used to be a brother. Now I'm not a brother anymore.
Because it shows just how thoroughly his grief has affected him. He used to believe that death was not the end of brotherhood, but now he feels so alone that it's as if he's lost that part of his identity. Luckily, his kids have something to say about that as well.
We'll be your brothers, Dad. Yeah, Dad. We'll be your brothers.
It reminds Kevin, and the audience, that family is about the bonds we make, not the blood we share. It's a choice we make and a promise we maintain. Biology didn't make Kevin, Carrie, Mike, and David brothers. Their love for one another did. So if his boys have that same love for their father, then why shouldn't they act as his brothers? It's in this moment that Kevin realizes that he actually did achieve what he wanted all along.
I want to be with my family. Be with my brothers.
And because of this, Kevin is finally able to cry without apologizing or pushing people away.
Thanks, boys. Thank you.
He is finally free of the curse. Now, part of what makes The Iron Claw such a nuanced examination of masculinity is just how well the female characters are written. So let's take a look at the two most prominent women in The Iron Claw. First is Doris. She's not in the movie all that much, and when she is, she doesn't have much influence over the narrative. But that's kind of the whole point. Her story is all about inaction and a lack of agency. She doesn't speak out against Fritz when he's pushing the boys too hard, she watches from afar as the boys wrestle, and she kind of just fails to protect her children in any meaningful way. Honestly, when I first watched the movie, I hated this character. Now, 50% of that was because she insulted Lily James.
Look how lovely she looks when she puts a little effort into her appearance.
But it was also because I focused solely on her failures and not on her struggles. On my second watch through, though, there were 4 key scenes that really complicated how I viewed her character. The first is at the family barbecue, when she reveals that Fritz was once passionate about music, just like Mike.
Musical like his father. When I first met your father, he was classically trained on the clarinet and had a music scholarship to University of Texas.
This exchange explains a whole lot about Fritz and Doris's relationship. When she fell in love with him, he was much softer than when we meet him in the movie. He wasn't always obsessed with wrestling. He used to be multifaceted and kind. Like boiling a frog, it would have been difficult for Doris to notice as that man began to fade away.
Wow, decided there was no future in music. I chose sport, and I was right.
By the time he was replaced by the Fritz we know now, she was already fully committed to the relationship. It seems like she's holding out hope that that person she fell in love with is still in there somewhere.
He used to play the most beautiful pieces for me when we first dated. Such a well-rounded man.
But Fritz doesn't want to even acknowledge that that side of himself ever existed.
Not like anyone I ever met.
Dottie, please.
The second scene is when she sees Mike looking at a painting and tells him,
I painted that.
Why didn't you tell anyone?
I had my reasons. Just don't remember them anymore.
This moment once again alludes to the person Doris used to be, and how she seems to have lost connection with that part of herself. She used to express herself through art, but so much of her individuality has faded away during her time as a wife and mother. The third scene is right after Mike's passing. Overwhelmed with grief, Doris explains that she can't wear her dress because she's already worn it previously.
I can't put it on. Everyone will recognize it. I can't. I need a new
guess.
This was the point on my second viewing where I really softened on the character. The reason she's so inactive throughout the whole movie is because her entire identity is performative. Currently, she is wife and mother to the Von Erichs. She believes she should be a silent onlooker in her own life rather than an active participant. This is why she's so focused on what dress she's wearing rather than allowing herself to grieve. Like her children, she believes she has a very specific part to play. In her mind, exhibiting any agency of her own would go against her function in the Von Erich family. Which leads us to the final time we see Doris. After Carrie dies and Kevin sells the company, Fritz comes into the kitchen looking for his wife.
Dottie?
In here.
What are you doing?
Painting.
It is the first time in who knows how long that Doris is doing something for herself. On top of this, when her husband wants to know what's for dinner, she says,
I didn't make anything. I'm not hungry.
I love this moment for Doris because she made a decision solely based on her own wants and needs. She could have made food for her husband, but she did something for herself instead. Does it make up for the ways in which she failed as a mother? No. But it is a small act of rebellion from a woman who has suffered in silence for far too long. Now, when it comes to Pam, her main function in the narrative is to help Kevin break free of his family's toxic mindset. But since I already focused on that in the previous section, I'd like to specifically discuss how selfless that choice actually was. See, when the movie introduces Pam, it's immediately obvious just how capable of a person she is. In stark contrast to Doris, she has an incredibly well-defined sense of self and isn't afraid to say what she wants.
I want kids. I want my own practice. I want a man who's okay with that.
I think it's safe to say that she would have been just fine with or without Kevin, which is why it's so amazing just how patient she is with him. Kevin needs Pam, but isn't able to open up to her emotionally for most of the narrative. Every time Kevin is struggling with grief, his immediate response is to push Pam further away, whether that means shutting down emotionally or literally moving out of their apartment. Pardon the repetition, but it reminds me of yet another verse from 21 Pilots. In a song from their album Vessel, Tyler sings,
You'll have to watch me struggle from several rooms away. But tonight, I need you to stay.
Pam doesn't owe Kevin the type of patience that she displays, especially when he leaves her to take care of their child all by herself. His actions are utterly unfair to her, but she stays with him regardless. I guess the reason I find her character so fascinating is because how it speaks to just how complicated love is. Love isn't fair. She would have been justified if she chose to leave Kevin because of his choices, but Pam chose to stay with him. Remaining in that relationship was how she chose to express her own agency. Is there a world in which Kevin didn't change for the better and instead becomes just like his father? Maybe. Would that make Pam's choice to stay with him wrong? Potentially. Love is often a leap of faith, and sometimes the people who take that leap fall flat on their face. But then again, sometimes they don't. Pam shows us just how complicated these types of things can be, which is why she's such a fascinating character. If you're still here, thank you for watching. This is my first time doing a beat-by-beat breakdown, so if you have suggestions for how to improve this format, please let me know. If you like this video, the most helpful thing you can do is watch another. I'm Dylan, and this is The Writer's Block.